and good morning. Are you ready to start your reading lesson for the week? We've got a great story we're going to read this week. It's a 3-part story. That means it's going to take us 3 days to do it. The name of the story is called Johnny and His Mule. So before we get started, we're going to look at a few things. We're going to check out a mule. We're going to learn a little bit about a mule. And you may already know about a mule. And then we're going to learn about where this is taking place. The setting of the story is what we're going to be looking at. Okay, so a mule is the offspring of a male donkey and a female horse. The mix creates an animal that's suitable in size and strength for difficult work. In other words, they're big and they're strong. In the 1900s, mules were used mostly on farms and as pack animals, but technology has decreased the need for mules to do hard labor. So anymore, people don't really use them to do hard labor, at least not in the United States, but maybe in different places. Anyway, that's a mule. So I wonder if we could look at some more pictures of some mules. Here you go. They got big ears, so they're a cross between a horse and a donkey is what a mule is. Big, aren't they? And I don't think that's a mule. I think that's a donkey. Now those are mules. Look how big and strong those things are. See how they're so stocky like a horse, but yet they look kind of like a donkey, don't they? Yeah, those are mules. All right, so now let's talk about the setting of this story, where this story is taking place. Now here's you a map of the United States. Here's Texas, you know where we live, right over here in East Texas. Greatest place on earth to live. That's an opinion, but it's my fact. Okay, so in the United States, there are 2 main mountain ranges. Do you know what they are and where they are? Well, one of them, the biggest one, is over in this area. It's called the Rocky Mountains. It's over here. Over here is a smaller mountain range. It's still pretty big, but it's called the Appalachian Mountains. You ever heard of hillbillies? Mountain people? Well, this is generally what they're talking about, where they say hillbillies live, up in these areas. So our story is going to take place in the Great Smoky Mountains, which is actually part of the Appalachian Range, and it is right in this area. And it's a beautiful area. The reason they call it the Great Smoky Mountains, not because the mountains smoke, but because of the dense forest there. It's always very foggy like there. It produces a steam. And so it looks foggy, so they've called it looks smoky. They call it the Great Smoky Mountains. And I think it's around the border of Kentucky and North Carolina or Tennessee, just somewhere right in this area. It's so beautiful there that they have made a national park there. So let's look at some of the pictures of the Great Smoky Mountains. Wow, isn't that beautiful? Do you see the smoke out there? It's not really smoke, it's steam coming up from that dense mountain area. Isn't that beautiful? Let's look at some more pictures of it. Oh, wow. I could wake up to that. What about you? Are you a mountain person? Oh, wow. Look at the beautiful Smoky Mountain look. Lovely. Have you ever been there? Maybe you've been there before. I've never been there, but maybe you have. Oh, I bet this is in the fall. Look at all those beautiful colors. Wow. How could someone believe there's not a God who made that? Did that all happen by itself? Not a chance. Oh my goodness, look at this. It's so beautiful on the earth, but yet the earth is cursed because of sin. It makes me wonder how much more beautiful heaven's going to be. Oh my goodness, look at those beautiful pictures. I could live there. What about you? Have you ever been there? That's a beautiful place, isn't it? All right, now let's go ahead and come back to reality. And let's take a look at some words that we're going to find in our story today. Now remember, it's a 3-part story, so we're just going to read the first part today, the second part tomorrow, and the third part the next day. Okay, so this sentence says, the children had to bustle along in order to reach school on time. What do you think that means? It means they had to hurry up. Peter was so upset that he stammered the words as he told the story. You ever stammered your words? Kind of means like you just stutter them, you can't get them out. He decided to swap his toy car for his brother's giant cookie. It means to trade. No matter how hard I pulled on the cow's rope, the balker would not move. What do you think a balker is? It's an animal that refuses to move, which, we hear about mules doing that sometime, maybe donkeys or something, but in this sentence it's talking about a cow. That balker just would not move. All right, would you look in your reader book on page 96? Now, there's on page 96 and 97, you'll see a whole picture of the area where Johnny lives, where this story takes place. Now, I've already shown you part of the setting. Remember, the setting is where and when a story takes place. Now, it didn't tell us in the beginning of this what time period this took place, but it did tell us where. But just by looking at the pictures, of course it's just drawings, but if you'll look at that, does that look like it's present day or in the past? I think it would probably be in the past. What do you think? All right, so let's look. The first part of this story is called A Good Excuse. Now, I'm going to read, but remember our deal. You have to follow along as I read, okay? And I'm going to ask you some questions. Now, as I read, I want you to find out what's so special about Johnny and where he lives and where he goes to school. And then there's an unusual tale that Johnny tells at school one day, and I want you to listen for what unusual tale he tells, okay? So you need to listen for those things. All right, let's get started. Away up in the Great Smoky Mountains, there's a town called Horny Hollow. It is not a very large town, and the great mountains standing all around it make it seem very small indeed. There are no more than 20 dwellings there, a courthouse, several stores, a church, and a schoolhouse. To this little schoolhouse came all the children in the town and a little mountain boy named Johnny. Johnny lived far back in the hills, a long, long way from town. He had to get up very early when the cocks were crowing for the sunrise to get to school on time, but in spite of the long walk over the mountains, he was never late for school. The town children might bustle into the schoolyard as the last bell was ringing. They might catch the end of the line as it was marching into the building. They might even tiptoe fearfully into the room after classes had started, but never Johnny. He was always in his place as the line marched in and always in his proper seat when classes began. In the fall, in the winter, and in the spring, it was always the same. Johnny was always on time. But one day, toward the end of the school year, Johnny was late. The last bell rang. Johnny was not there. 9 o'clock came. Still no Johnny. 10 o'clock rolled around. 10:30. Not a sign of Johnny. It was so very late now. The teacher and the children began to wonder what had happened. Perhaps Johnny was sick, or perhaps he had fallen over the steep mountainside on the way to school. But a half hour later, at 11 o'clock, there was a shuffle outside the door. It opened slowly, and Johnny creaked guiltily into the room. "Why, Johnny," cried the teacher, "it's 11 o'clock. Why are you so late?" "I just couldn't help it, Miss Mary," stammered Johnny, and he looked as though he might cry at any moment. But tell me what happened," urged Miss Mary. "I got into town early this morning, Miss Mary," began Johnny, "in plenty of time for school, but I stopped for a minute in the town square to watch the auction. Everybody knew about the auction. It was held every Friday, and the mountaineers called it Trade Day. They came in from all the surrounding hills and ranges, bringing anything they had on hand, and they wanted to swap or sell. Handmade chairs, baskets, turkeys, jackknives, horses, preserves, feather pillows, anything and everything went on sale in the town square on Friday. And so," continued Johnny, "while I was standing there, an old mule was put up to be sold. The auctioneer began shouting, 'What am I offered for this mule? What am I bid? What am I bid?' Nobody would begin the bidding, so just to get the sale started, I hollered out, 'I bid 5 cents. I thought sure somebody would bid higher because mules cost a lot of money, but nobody did, and so they gave me the mule." And there I stood, Miss Mary, holding the mule by the halter. I didn't know what to do with him. About the only thing I could think of was to take him along to school with me, so I started toward the schoolhouse leading the mule. I soon found out why nobody wanted that mule. After we had gone about a block, he stopped stock still. I tried every way to get him to go along, but he wouldn't budge an inch. He was a balker. Lots of other people tried to make him go, but no, sir. That mule wouldn't go until he felt like it. After a while, all by myself, he took a notion to start. He walked another block, and then he balked again. Miss Mary, I tell you the truth, it took me 2 hours to get that critter 4 blocks to the schoolhouse. That's why I'm late. It really is. Why, Johnny, exclaimed Miss Mary, I never heard such a tale. If you don't believe it, Miss Mary, just look out the window, replied Johnny. The teacher gazed through the window, and so did all the pupils. There, tied to a tree, was a mule. His head hung down, and his large ears flopped sadly. There was no doubt about it. Johnny's tale was true. Lessons began again, and the day wore on. Johnny didn't pay much attention to his lessons. The thought of his mule lay heavy on his mind. What could he do with him? All right, that's the end of that, so don't turn the page. All right, so let's go back to the front of the book, the front of the page of the story, and let's ask a few questions here. Okay, so the town where Johnny lives, can you describe it? Only has about 20 buildings, some few houses, schoolhouse, a courthouse. Now, what is so odd about Johnny? He is never, ever late. Is that like you? How does the author let you know the teacher and the children are surprised that Johnny's late? On page 97, he uses some exclamation marks after some of the sentences, and that lets us know that, ooh, something's up, right? Look at page 98. What is the shuffle, shuffle noise the teacher and the children hear outside the door? It's Johnny walking up to the door. What is the phrase, Johnny creaked guiltily into the room? What does that mean? He opened the door and kind of poked his head in, trying to get in, knowing that he was guilty because he was late. He was kind of scared about it. Now, was it wise for Johnny to stop at the auction on his way to school and bid on that mule? Why do you think so? Well, why did he do it anyway? Why did he bid on that mule? He thought he'd just get it started, right? And somebody else would do it. Do you think Johnny was happy to get the mule at first? It's kind of hard to tell, isn't it? What's Miss Mary's reaction to Johnny's excuse? She doesn't really believe him at first, does she? But what proof did Johnny have that he was telling the truth? That mule was tied to a tree outside. Exactly. Why does Johnny worry about the mule for the rest of the day? Probably just worried about what he's going to do with him. How's he going to feed him? What's he going to do? On page 99, let's find the paragraph that describes the teacher and the children looking out the window. That's going to be the first paragraph up at the top of page 99 on the right hand side where it says the teacher gazed. Can you read that paragraph out loud? His tale was true. Now, close your book. What do you think Johnny's going to do with the mule? We're going to find out tomorrow. Okay, let's get our work text out. We only have one page today. It's page 39. You get to do a little coloring today. I don't know if you like to color. Now, you see this is a quilt up at the very top. Now, in the days of when Johnny lived back in the day, women made quilts a whole lot, and people still make lots of quilts. I used to make quilts. I was never good at it, but I did. And they would make patchwork quilts because they couldn't afford to go buy all the beautiful materials, so they would just patch pieces together that they had. Sometimes they went together and sometimes they didn't, but usually they could put them together in some kind of a shape or a form or some sort of a symbol even sometimes. So you get to choose your own key. You get to choose your own colors. You'll need 6 different colors. Do you see on the left hand side where it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and it has those little white rectangles beside it? Okay, that's your key. That means you get to choose what color number 1 is, and just color whatever number 1 is going to be. It might be red or yellow or green or whatever. On number 2, put a different color. Number 3, a different color. And then use that key to color in your quilt. And then you'll see what beautiful colors, how they come together and they make a patchwork quilt. Then what I'd like for you to do on your own, since I read this whole story, or the first part of the story, I would like for you to read this purple box in the middle of the page. And then I'd like for you to use what you learned there to answer the questions at the bottom. Now, I'm not going to grade this, but I would like to see it. And if you get your answers correct, that tells me that you read well, okay? If you need to go back and look in your book, you can, but I don't think you'll need to. I think everything should be in that purple box, okay? All right, let me know if you need any help. And other than that, that's all for today.